All right, so welcome back to the comprehensive class ranking guide. Today we are going to be establishing a baseline for each of the 12 classes for each of the 7 roles. This is going to be one of the chunkier videos in the series, but it'll help really shorten all of those future videos by establishing some things up front. So we're going to start with the Artificer. We're going to go just alphabetically. And I think the Artificer in the frontline role is a really good example of what ignoring subclass means for this video. Obviously, everyone is aware that the Armor Artificer exists and is an incredible frontliner. When we get to that, we will see that it is among the best possible in the game. However, all of those features that make it a good frontliner are almost entirely contained within the subclass. We just look at Artificer with their firearm proficiency, magical tinkering, their tool proficiencies, and of course, infused item. We only see very mild benefits allocated to the frontliner role. We're not getting that armor proficiency. We are getting shields, but really what we want to be doing if we want to frontline as just an Artificer with no subclass is throw all those infusions for like enhanced defense and repelling shield. But even then, our saving throws aren't fantastic. We're kind of struggling in the melee. We're a D8 subclass. I think we're only getting mild support here. This is a B. For beatdown, I do think that there is a little bit of additional support. I think that the infusions help with that a little bit more. Some of the features like spell storing item is going to help you to be pumping out a lot more damage and spellcasting later on in the game, and you do have access to some pretty good damage spells. I'd say overall this is also about a B in the beatdown category. As for Infiltrator Explorer, we do have access to certain spells that might help us to infiltrate or explore, but in general the class is not oriented in that way. We could take a high dexterity and pump it up, but I think this is kind of the definition of a B as well. We could twist some of these features to make them work, but they certainly weren't designed to work for an infiltrator. I do want to note that the homunculus infusion would be a very effective spy for us as well. Investigator. We've got some great stuff here as an investigator. Obviously, we're a high intelligence build, which means we have a pretty good investigation skill. We also have some tools, right? The right tool for the job. We can perform various tasks with those tools. And if you look at the tools, a lot of them have some amount of analysis involved, like the alchemy kit or the poisoner's kit can help you identify different materials. So that's pretty nifty. I think also with the investigator role, you do have access to some spells that are particularly useful for identifying objects or just getting more information. So overall, I'm going to say this is an A tier investigator, just baseline. Support. You do have access to some support spells. Spark of Inspiration is a really, really helpful support ability that you can have on your character, especially with a high intelligence modifier. But overall, it's lacking the kind of packing the punch that we would expect. Obviously, infusions, we could give those out to people, but then we're taking away from ourselves. So I think this may be a B tier support without any subclasses, but definitely shows a lot of promise. For utility, I think it comes down to those tool proficiencies, those skills. I think that we are able to kind of drum up a solution. And of course, with access to half spellcasting, we can take a variety of different solutions for unique problems. We'll give this a B in utility. And then for negotiator, there's really nothing that we're doing that is helpful in any way for a negotiator role. We don't want charisma. We don't have a lot for our skills. And as far as money making, Artificer is not the worst way to go, but it's certainly not the direct path to money making that certain other classes have. I'd say this is a C tier negotiator. For our Barbarian, we are an incredible frontliner. Our survivability with all the features that we get, with our kind of danger sense, with this encouragement to take high dexterity, our D12 hit die for our hit dice, and we're always up in the melee with our rage doing reckless attack, encouraging enemies to attack us, Without any subclass features, I think this is easily an A tier frontliner. I think it's also a pretty good beatdown class. I really waffled on whether or not to give it a B or an A. That rage bonus to damage isn't that high, but what it boils down to is the reckless attack, giving us advantage whenever we attack. That's quite good, and it pairs well with so many other abilities in the game. This class really lends itself to that kind of like Great Weapon Master build, which is considered among the best sustained damage dealers in the game. I think this is an A tier damage dealer right on its own. No subclass features needed. That's pretty much where the Barbarian is gonna fall off. So for our Infiltrator Explorer, I debated giving this a D, but actually you do sort of want a little bit of dexterity on your Barbarian. So it's possible you could actually have a decent stealth score, but no spellcasting of any kind, no tools or solutions for sneaking into a place or investigating of any kind. A mild stealth score is not gonna cut it. So C tier Infiltrator. For your Investigator, Barbarians generally are attacking with strength-based weapons because their rage requires it. They are on the front line, so they want a good constitution, and their dexterity helps their armor class when they're not wearing armor, as well as helping them with their dexterity saving throws. So they are not taking intelligence or wisdom. Those are dump stats for Barbarians. They could take proficiency in some of those skills, but they have no benefits to those skills other than that. And they have no spellcasting, as I mentioned. So they have no way to perform this role. I would say that this is a D tier ranking. Do not try to be a Barbarian Investigator. It's just too frustrating to make work. Support, there's really nothing here that's going to give you any kind of support bonus. So really, I've got to say this is a D tier support. As for utility, I would also say that the Barbarian does not bring a lot of utility to the party. Almost all of their abilities have something to do with combat or fighting in combat. Yeah, there's really no utility to speak of in the core class of the Barbarian, C tier. And as far as Negotiator, similar thing, no bonuses to skills, you can't take Charisma. This is a C tier Negotiator. Moving on to our Bard. Our Bard, the abilities that we're really looking at, right, are full spellcasting, we've got our Bardic Inspiration, we've got our Song of Rest, Jack of all trades, Expertise, and that's mostly Encounter Charm. So when we look at those features, none of those have anything to do with frontline. We're not getting heavy armor proficiency. We can wear a shield, but we are a D8 hit die class, say C tier for the Bard frontliner. Beatdown, because we do have those spells, and we do have magical secrets, which allow us to get some great other spells from other classes, I think we have the versatility to be a B tier damage dealer without any subclass involvement. Same for Infiltrator Explorer. I think that spellcasting really opens us up to the possibility of casting invisibility and infiltrating in that way. We can also probably talk our way past the guards as a charisma-based build. For our Investigator, this really isn't a case where we're taking a good, insight, perception, investigation skill set, but we could put Expertise in one of those, and we would have a pretty decent role to that as well. So we could pivot to there. And we have certain access to certain divination spells as well. So I'd say B tier Investigator. Of course, we've got to talk about the support role for the Bard. Bard has access to some fantastic support spells. The Bardic Inspiration is a trademark support feature. Song of Rest is really incredible for helping our party get back on their feet. A tier support build without any subclass involvement. We've also got some pretty good utility. This mostly comes from our strength in Jack of all trades, being able to try out a lot of different potential skills. We have our full spellcasting, so we can choose into some certain spells that we might want for solving certain problems. Other than that, not a ton, but keep in mind that we do have magical secrets, allowing us to choose from a wider variety. So I'd say this is a B tier utility character. Of course, as a negotiator, with our skill proficiency and expertise, with our high charisma, you can't help but fall into a negotiator role as a bard. Without any subclass involvement, I think this is an A tier negotiator across the board. Cleric. Now, I think Cleric wants to be a pretty good frontliner. A lot of clerics get heavy armor proficiency, but not all of them, and we're not talking about the subclass features. We do have a D8 hit die, and in general, a lot of our abilities and spells don't necessarily require or incentivize us to be in the melee. Just our normal channel divinity that every cleric gets is turn undead, which it's good to be, you know, in the middle of the undead if you do that, but that's much more utility than it is frontline. So I'd say they're just a C tier frontliner. As a beatdown, there's no multi-attack, but you do get the full spell casting. So I think it's probably a B tier damage dealer, just because you can take the spells that you want to take. As an infiltrator explorer, I don't believe you're doing anything with stealth on the, or with dexterity or stealth on this character. There's no bonus to those skill checks. You do have certain spells that might help you, like in the illusion school. In general, I think that there's not really a lot happening here for the cleric. I'm giving them a C tier infiltrator. As an investigator, you've got great wisdom, so your insight checks are good, your perception checks are good, and sometimes that's enough, but also clerics have some of the best, like, ask your god or like consult the god spells on their spell list possible. So I think that you are a B tier investigator. You can certainly pivot that way. You've got some support within the class if you want to push it. Obviously for support, clerics are synonymous with support. They have one of the best support spellcasting lists in the game. With that said, there's actually not a lot of class features that speak to support. So I would say that if you want to pivot your cleric to support, you'll have a very easy time of it, but it is not handed to you. So I think they're a B tier. I think cleric is a B tier support class. Am I saying cleric's worse support than bard? I think I am. I think that's what I'm saying. Incredible. The things you learn. This is largely because cleric gets a lot from their subclass. So as we will see in the later ranking videos, I don't think any of the cleric subclasses are going to stay at a B tier. As far as utility goes, they've got incredible undead counters, so I guess that's a point. And they've got full spell casting, so they can sort into the kind of utility solutions that they want to have. And then, of course, don't forget about your beautiful, beautiful 10th level feature, Divine Intervention, which we defined utility as a unique solution to a unique problem, and having your god just step in and intervene every once in a while is that. I think maybe we give this a B in utility as well. As for the negotiator, there's really nothing here that is directly related to negotiation. You're not taking a high charisma. You could, do all the same normal things that everyone does, but generally speaking, your spell list doesn't help you very much here either. I'm gonna just call this a C in negotiation. Okay, Druid. Druids can wild shape. Druid gets lots of additional hit points when they do wild shape, which makes them decently tanky. Usually you're grabbing a decently high constitution score so that you can make your concentration saves. So you've got hit points. You can't really wear armor, but your saving throws are usually pretty all right. I think this is a B tier frontliner. There is some stuff like with Shillelagh and stuff that would allow you to be in the melee as a druid, shifting to wild shapes as needed. Same for beatdown. Druid is a full spellcaster, so they get access to some spells. They have some of the best AoE or like large area of effect, multi-target damage spells in the game. Moonbeam's quite good, but you kind of have to twist it in that direction. As an infiltrator explorer, the druid is absolutely unparalleled. The wild shape feature allowing you to change into an innocuous creature and scout out an enemy camp is much better than any stealth roll that you can do. If that's not enough, I believe they also have access to a variety of spells that would help them to do this. They can recruit animals with some of their spells and abilities. They can have familiars. I'm going to give them an A tier infiltrator explorer, just base druid. As an investigator, they've got the wisdom, so they can do insight, they can do the perception. Some of their spells are actually really, really good for Investigation in particular. I guess I'm going to give them an A tier as well for Investigator. Yeah, I think so. And then as far as support is concerned, Druids have a great spell list for support. They have lots of healing, lots of buff spells, lots of various things that they can do. I do think that the actual class features, when you look at them, don't really do any support features. But that spell list is really good. So I gotta rank them the same as the Cleric. I gotta give them a B as a base class for support. As far as utility is concerned, the Wild Shape is an extremely flexible feature that lets you solve all kinds of interesting problems. They have some basic things. They know Druidic. Their spell list has a lot of different environmental and control the battlefield style spells. I think they're A tier in utility. I really do. I think they've got some fantastic utility options. And then as far as negotiation is concerned, they're not really inherently charismatic characters. They generally have a flavor stereotype as not being part of society. And as far as gold making is concerned, they couldn't be less interested. So I think this is just a C tier negotiator. That still makes the Druid the strongest of the classes that we have ranked so far. Our fighter is next. I think our fighter has incredible frontline capacity. They've got the heavy armor, they've got the shields, they've got lots and lots of extra feats and hit points. And I think that they are solidly in the A tier as far as frontliners are concerned. Similarly, because of Action Surge, Second Wind, all of their different feats and the ability to pick up different fighting styles, they have great beatdown capacity, great sustained damage over time. I think they've got A tier damage as a fighter. As an infiltrator explorer, this is tough. It's going to depend greatly on what kind of fighter you are building. Obviously, a heavy armor wearing fighter could not do a good job at infiltrating or exploring. They would have to go the stealth route. They don't have spells to do invisibility or illusion or anything like that. But fighter does allow you to go a dexterity-based route. You can be a ranged fighter, you can be more of a finesse weapon fighter, and you could have pretty high stealth and choose not to go into that heavy armor. So this is mutually exclusive with the frontliner, but I do think that you could be a decent infiltrator as a dexterity-based fighter. I'll give it a B. As an investigator, a fighter generally doesn't have intelligence or wisdom. They have no divine spellcasting. I'm giving them a C as far as investigation. Support, not really any fighter features that lend themselves to support. C in the support role. Utility, most of their abilities have to do with attacking and damage. I'm going to give them a C in utility. And of course, negotiation. Generally speaking, you're not a charisma character. You don't have any bonuses to skills. Most fighters that I know when it comes to negotiation just sit on the sidelines and sharpen their weapons. C tier. That brings us to the monk. So the monk actually has decent armor class with their unarmed defense. They have the ability to take the dodge action as a bonus action, which gives them a lot of survivability. They're usually in the melee because they're making those unarmed strikes. I think you could make a frontliner out of a monk. Your problem is going to be hit points, right? But your saving throws are pretty good. I think monk gets a B in frontliner. As far as beatdown is concerned, monk is notoriously not very good, but when you look at their class features, a lot of them have to do with damage. A lot of them. You've got your martial arts, you've got your key points with flurry of blows, you've got your key fueled attack, your extra attack, your key empowered strikes. I'll give them a B in beatdown because that is clearly what they want to be, but this is a low B. This is a B- in beatdown. As an infiltrator, they do have a pretty high dexterity, and they're not wearing armor, so they could certainly stealth around an enemy encampment. No spellcasting, so none of the other options are available to them. As an investigator, they have a pretty high wisdom, so they'll have good insight, they'll have good perception, no spellcasting. I guess this is going to be a B tier investigator. As a support character, monk cannot do anything to support. They have no support abilities, they have no spells, they have nothing that they can do. Utility, they've got slow fall and they've got deflect missiles, but really these are not going to solve a ton of problems. They are good at solving problems for themselves with things like stillness of mind, wholeness of body, but generally speaking, they're not bringing any utility to the party. C tier. And then negotiation, no charisma, no bonuses to skills of any kind, and really no gold making potential what to speak of. C tier. Our ranger certainly could do frontline. I think it's possible. The thing about the ranger is they've got some melee options, but most of those are buried in the subclasses. Most of the class itself is dedicated toward this like nature and environment and like favorite foe, favorite terrain. Nothing of it has to do with frontline. You're a D8 class. I think it's just kind of a C tier frontliner. You are a pretty decent beatdown with your spell list. Rangers are half casters. You've got access to some damage spells. You've got access to favorite foe potentially to do a little bit extra damage, and you've got extra attack. So, it's an option. B tier. Exploration is like part of their class identity, and they do have a lot of abilities that let them go into different terrains and kind of move quickly, move stealthily. They've got leader level things like hiding in plain sight that allows them to camouflage themselves. So I think we gotta give them some credit here and give them a tier in Infiltrator Explorer. As for Investigator, they are a wisdom-based class. The insight, they have the perception. Their spell list isn't great for divination style things. They can do things like detect poison and disease pretty easily. They're not a full spellcaster, so they're not getting a ton of those spell slots. I think this is probably a B tier investigator. As far as support is concerned, the ranger does have some spells, notably like Goodberry, that are really, really good support options, and those are going to come way in handy in the early parts of the game. So I feel like I have to give them at least a B, but I can't give them higher at that because they don't have great buff spells. The spellcasting progression isn't super great, and they don't have a lot of things to prevent like status conditions. Utility, you gotta give them credit for all of these weird features that help them deal with difficult terrain, nature. Most of the ranger features have something to do with utility, although not, towards super common problems that come up. Your favorite enemy is gonna be type specific. Your favorite terrain is going to be setting specific, and then you're not going to worry about difficult terrain, but that's not a huge part of the game. So probably a B in utility. You do have that half spell casting to work with as well, and nothing really for the negotiator role whatsoever. There's no charisma involved. You don't get a huge amount of bonuses to your skills. C tier. For the rogue, surprisingly, a lot of the rogue features do have to do with mitigating damage. And because dexterity often adds to armor class with these kind of medium and light armors, and the rogue is a very high dexterity character, they make an okay frontliner. Your issue is obviously going to be saving throws and your health points overall, as well as kind of the ability to like lock an enemy into that combat. But I think you could build a rogue into a tank. I think perfectly reasonable, B tier. For beatdown, I debated back and forth because obviously rogues do get sneak attack and dexterity is their main stat. Dexterity has a bunch of weapons associated with it, including ranged weapons, which can often be quite good for dealing damage. The sad truth is there's not a ton of features in the rogue class that help it do a lot of damage. Sneak attack is pretty weak, it doesn't keep up very well, and there's nothing about the class itself that's benefiting you other than maxing your dexterity, using a crossbow, taking crossbow master, the sharpshooter, all that kind of. Especially the fact that rogues lack multi-attack, lacking really any other ability to like really hone in on this damage. Maybe their cunning action allowing them to hide. I think it's a B tier damage dealer. It's not much. It's really a low B tier damage dealer. As far as infiltration, however, their expertise, high dexterity, and emphasis on stealth as just a flavor concept make them a great infiltrator. I think they're A tier, even though they don't have access to any spells. For an investigator goes, You're usually not taking a lot of wisdom with this character. You're not taking a lot of intelligence. You don't have any divination spells. I'm going to give this just a C. No support capacity whatsoever. Utility. Usually the rogue comes up when they use their thieves tools, which you automatically get, or their thieves can't, or they have expertise in one of these skills that's important. I think there is some utility that's on the table here with the rogue, although not a ton. I'm gonna give it a B tier in utility. And then negotiation. Usually these guys are actually making a decent amount of money, or focused on money. I think I do have to give this a B tier negotiator, if only for the expertise. On to the Paladin. The Paladin as a frontliner, I think, is an absolute staple. The Paladin is encouraged to wear heavy armor, encouraged to have the shield, encouraged to be in the thick of things in the melee. Their smites are on melee hits only, for now. I think they're an A tier frontliner without any subclass features. Similarly, I think they are just like Barbarian in the sense that they've got the strength, they've got that like big weapon right in combat. If you choose to take the feats that go with it, I think they make fantastic damage dealers, especially with their smite ability. A tier beatdown. They cannot be an infiltrator because they don't have the stat bandwidth to grab dexterity. They have no relevant illusion or invisibility spells. They don't shape change. They could talk their way into an enemy camp, but usually Paladin oaths, just like the concept of them, means you're not a very deceptive person or not very good at deceiving. I'm just gonna give these a D tier in infiltration. They've really got nothing benefiting them in investigation. They do have some good spells that can help them find things out, but they've got no intelligence, no wisdom. Generally speaking, I think this is C tier. I waffled a lot on the support ranking for Paladin. Obviously, two big things come to mind. Firstly, they are half spellcasters with a lot of support spells. They have access to many of the best support spells that clerics do, and they can cast them. And they've also got this aura of protection, which gives everybody a huge bonus to their saving throws. It's like the reason you run a paladin in your party. It's an incredibly helpful spell, or helpful class effect, and it is support, right? It's specifically a support effect. You've also got your lay on hands, which removes certain conditions and scales really nicely with level. So it gives you tons of healing. You've got your buff spells, you've got status condition effects, you've got saving throw benefits. It's got everything. I think it's an A tier without any subclass bonuses. It might even be S tier support without any subclass bonuses. Wildly how good paladins are. They have some basic utility. They're pretty good against fiends, right, and undead and things like that. Some of their other basic things, like your Aura of Courage or Cleansing Touch or something. These are support abilities, but they're also helpful for certain encounters. They do have their half spellcasting. I'd say it's a B tier in utility. Then when you talk about Negotiator, paladins are usually charisma-based characters, so that's really good. And I think that generally their presence lends itself to being the face of the party. You might not necessarily get the numbers on those deception or persuasion rolls that you need, but I think there is something about the codes that make you role play in a way that tends to win allies. I'm gonna call this a B tier negotiator. Sorcerer. Sorcerer frontliner. Don't do it. D tier. No benefits whatsoever. You're a D6 hit die class. Get out of there. Don't be in there. However, Sorcerer spells have some great damage options, both for single target and for large AoE. I think even without anything else, you can use your meta magic and your spell list, and that's it, to do great damage on the field. A tier beatdown. As an Infiltrator Explorer, you do have access to spells that are going to help you to do Infiltration and Exploration, including Invisibility, B tier. You're generally not going to have a lot of Wisdom or Intelligence. You do have some Divination-based spellcasting, but not as much as some other casters. C tier. Support. Sorcerer does have some support, especially like buff spells on their list. It's not a ton. I guess that's going to be a C tier as well. Utility, full spell casting, lots of fun features that allow them to manipulate that spell casting. I think that sorcerers do a great job kind of coming up with strange solutions to new problems, and they're very flexible with their sorcery points and their spell slots, able to kind of make things happen the way that they need it to. I would say this is a B tier utility character. And they are charisma focused, which means they make a pretty decent negotiator. They might be able to even cast certain spells that help them out with negotiation. I think it's a B tier negotiator right off the bat. Warlock frontliner. I think there's nothing that helps the Warlock be a frontliner in their spells, in their class features, but they do seem to have this draw. They have like this subclass, or the subclass, Pact of the Sword, Pact of the Blade, that seems to encourage them to be in the melee. They can take Armor of Agathis, which is like a melee based. I think maybe this is a C tier frontliner. You can't make it into a good one, but you can make it not a bad one. As far as beatdown is concerned, the Warlock Eldritch Blast combination is considered the gold standard by which all other builds are judged, and it's incredibly easy to set up. I'm going to call this an A tier beatdown class. For as an Infiltrator or Explorer, they do have access to great spells that might help with this. The Pact of the Chain helps you get a familiar that can go in and do this, or you can take certain Eldritch Invocations, which are very helpful, either to enhance your familiar, to be able to talk your way into a place, to do invisibility or deception, Mask of Many Faces. I think they're maybe an A tier Infiltrator. They're not as great of an investigator. Their limited spell slots mean you don't want to blow any on your divination spells. You're not taking intelligence, you're not taking wisdom, you don't have bonuses to your skills. Probably a C tier investigator. There is some support built into the Warlock. If you really try, you can take Pact of the Talisman. Some of the spells work. I think B tier support. It's not really the one you want, but it could potentially come up. Utility. Warlock has lots of versatility. I think this is all contained in their Eldritch Invocations is really where that utility is looking. But some of your spells are very useful to like cast and have battlefield control or lockdown. You can do a lot of things with your Pact of the Chain familiar. And then your Mystic Arcanums are going to start popping up at later levels to give you other benefits. I think it's probably just a B tier utility character. Warlocks are also a charisma-based caster, but unlike other charisma-based casters, some of their Eldritch Invocations would allow them to automatically have proficiency in things like Persuasion, Deception, help them disguise themselves as other people, potentially give themselves advantage. I think they're great negotiators, and they're A tier negotiators along with the bards. Lastly, wizards. Wizard frontliner, for the same reasons as the sorcerer, don't do it. You do get the shield spell, still don't do it. It's not good, don't do it. Beatdown. Wizards are very good at dealing damage with their spells. They've got the Evoker class, they've got the Necromancer class. They have access to summoning spells that the Sorcerer doesn't. I think if the Sorcerer is A, the Wizard is A as well. Wizards are great Infiltrator Explorers with access to invisibility, to find familiar, to illusion spells. They could even take decent dexterity and stealth if they wanted to, but they've got a ton of magical options for dealing with infiltration and exploration. A. As an investigator, they've got a high intelligence, they've got access to some of the best divination spells in the game, full casters, recovering some spell slots and doing ritual casting. These guys are A tier investigators. The wizard does not do great healing. They notably don't have a single healing spell on the list. They do have certain things that can benefit party members like buffs, status removal. I think it would be very difficult to pull off a support wizard, but I do think that it is possible. I think maybe that makes it a low B tier, B- in support category. For utility, wizard is one of the best. They've got one of the widest spell lists. They can prepare a large number, but they've got a huger number known that keeps building over the course of the campaign. They are the one who's got the tool for any given situation. I think it's not very hard at all to be the party's utility caster, A tier utility. As far as negotiation, I do realize that there are some spells in the spell list that can help with negotiation, even just taking like the Friends cantrip. I'm not a huge fan of most of those spells. Most of them give the indication that the person is aware after you after the spell ends, I'm going to say that they're just a C tier negotiator. Those are the baselines for all 12 classes across all 7 roles. Some of them might seem a little bit harsh, and I know that some of you are sitting at your screen screaming, but like Blade Singer Wizard is a great frontliner. We'll get to the subclasses in the full video series. All of these are just the floor. If the subclass does nothing else, it at least can do this well at each of these given roles. Tune in 2 weeks where we will have our first real subclass ranking video for the Artificer.